The master bedroom of the villa. I, 8 months pregnant, moved slowly as I packed Song Jingin's luggage. Every shirt was ironed without a single wrinkle, neatly arranged by color shade in the suitcase. The cufflinks gleamed after a thorough polish. The ties were rolled with precision. Even the socks were paired off one by one. I did this work with meticulous care, as if performing some sacred ritual. He stood before the massive floor-to-ceiling window, his back to me as he spoke on the phone. His voice was low and pleasing to the ear, but every word felt like an ice pick stabbing into my heart. This case requires my personal presence. Half a year isn't a long time. The household, there's nothing to worry about. Everything is arranged. Song Jinghan spoke to the person on the other end, his tone casual and dismissive. A woman being pregnant. What's the big deal? Assistant Lee will stay behind to handle everything. My hands paused for a moment, but only a moment. Then, I picked up a navy blue tie, his favorite. I rolled it slowly and placed it into the side pocket of the suitcase. Yes, a woman being pregnant. In his eyes, it was probably less important than his company's quarterly financial report. He ended the call and turned around. His face was handsome as a sculpture, but his brows and eyes were full of distance and indifference. Song Jinghan watched my clumsy movements, his brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. Before he spoke, let the servants handle these things. Your body isn't convenient. Don't force yourself. I want to pack them for you personally. Jinghan, I looked up, forcing the gentlest, most harmless smile onto my face. You'll be gone for so long. I'll miss you. Make sure to eat on time when you're away. Your stomach isn't good. I gave your assistant a list of things you can't touch. My rambling was cut off. Song Jinghan lifted his wrist, glancing at that million-yuan Patek Philippe, his tone laced with impatience. Time's almost up. I need to go. My heart felt like it was pricked by a needle, but the smile on my face didn't waver. I supported my waist, slowly straightened up, and walked over to him. I helped adjust his collar, which was already perfectly neat. All right, I'll see you off. From the second-floor bedroom to the first-floor hall, I walked very slowly. He took large strides, walking ahead, with no intention of waiting for me or offering a hand. One hand on the stair railing, the other cradling my belly, I took each step carefully and alone. The maid, Lu Ma, saw me from downstairs and rushed up to support me, muttering with concern, "Madam, take it slow." Song Jinghan was already standing at the entrance. A servant handed him his coat and briefcase. He put them on, turned around, and looked at me as I finally reached him. "I'm leaving," he said. 3 simple words, as if saying goodbye to a business partner. "Husband," I called out, my voice soft. He stopped and looked at me. I stepped forward, rising onto my tiptoes, with my belly so large. This movement was painfully awkward. I gently pressed a kiss onto his cold lips, then quickly pulled away. I looked into his eyes and smiled. "Safe travels. Oh, and when your plane lands, I have a gift for you. Make sure to check your phone." He clearly didn't take my mention of a gift seriously. He just grunted a casual om-hom, then turned and climbed into the black Rolls-Royce without a second thought. The car slowly pulled away from the villa until it completely disappeared from sight. In that instant, all the gentleness, reluctance, and attachment on my face were peeled away like a mask. Piece by piece, Lu Ma supported me, asking cautiously, "Madam, the master is gone. Please, don't be too sad." I turned to look at her, my face showing a calmness and pleasure she had never seen before. "Sad?" I curled the corner of my mouth, stroking my belly, and said flatly, "Lu Ma, help me turn on the computer in the study upstairs. The real show is just beginning." Song Jinghan, the farther you go, the harder you'll fall. When you come back, this home, and your business empire, might just have a new surname. I hope you like this big gift I've prepared for you. Chapter 2, The Beginning of the Collapse. Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport, private apron. Song Jingin's Gulfstream G650 slowly came to a stop. The cabin door opened, and the cold French wind rushed in. He took a deep breath, a faint smile curling at the corners of his lips. This cross-border merger case, he had been planning it for an entire year. Once the contract was signed, the Song Group's European market footprint would triple. The old fossils on the board wouldn't dare to boss him around anymore. He walked down the steps. Assistant Lee had already arranged for a reception team to wait. A Frenchman approached, speaking fluent English. "President Song, welcome to Paris. The car is ready. We'll go to the hotel first to rest." Song Jinghan nodded slightly and sat in the back seat of the Bentley Mulsanne. The car drove smoothly out of the airport, the Parisian streetscape slowly passing by the window. Only then did he remember when Ran's docile face before he boarded the plane. She had smiled at him at the door, saying she had a gift for him. Song Jin-han let out a scoff. What kind of gift? Nothing more than handmade photo albums, ultrasound pictures of the baby, or a scarf she knitted herself. These cheap, useless things, he had received far too many of them. He had no feelings for Ran. 3 years ago, he married her only because of his grandfather's dying wish. When Ran's grandfather had been the Song family's former butler, once saving the old master's life. On his deathbed, the old master forced him to swear he would marry Ran. He did as he was told, but to him, this marriage was nothing more than a cold marriage certificate. The one truly in his heart was Su Wanqing. Wanqing was his childhood sweetheart, well-educated and gentle as water. They were from the same world, learning piano, horse riding, and attending various high society banquets together since childhood. If it weren't for that damned dying wish, the person he should have married was Su Wanqing. At the thought of Su Wanqing, Song Jingin's gaze softened. He pulled out his phone, wanting to send her a message to let her know he had arrived safely, but the moment the phone screen lit up, he froze. A text message notification popped up on the screen. The sender, Ran. The word gift made him frown. When did she start playing these kinds of tricks? Annoyed, Song Jin-han tapped open the message, but the moment he saw the content, the smile on his face instantly froze. That was not an ordinary greeting text message. It was a densely packed, hundreds of characters long document. The very first line, bolded and blackened, read, Song Corporation's financial fraud records over the past 3 years. A detailed list of assets transferred to overseas shell companies, and the evidence chain of Song Jingin's money laundering through underground banks. Every single character was like a bomb, exploding inside his skull. Song Jingin's face turned ashen white in an instant. The fingers gripping his phone turned pale at the knuckles from the sheer force. He scrolled down rapidly. The faster he read, the more ragged his breathing became. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. How could Ran possibly know these things? He jerked his head up and roared at the driver up front. Stop the car. The driver, startled, quickly pulled over to the side of the road. Song Jin-han shoved the door open and stood in the cold wind of Paris, his fingers trembling as he dialed Ran's number. I'm sorry, the number you have dialed is currently switched off. The gentle female voice now sounded like a mockery. Song Jin-han hung up and dialed again, still switched off. The veins on his forehead throbbed violently. Something inside him was collapsing in a mad frenzy. He stared at the text message, trying desperately to find a single flaw, some proof that it was forged, that Ran was just trying to scare him, but he was a seasoned veteran of the business world. He knew better than anyone. Those numbers, those accounts, those transaction records, they were all real. What Ran had sent him was a complete chain of evidence, enough to send him straight to prison. Song Jingin's mind went blank. His palms were drenched in cold sweat. He leaned against the car door. The Parisian street seemed blurring into a smear of colors before his eyes. He racked his brain, desperately trying to recall, where had he slipped up? How had Ran gotten her hands on this? She was just a housewife who hadn't even finished college. Every day, all she did was tend to the flowers at home, cook meals, and wait for him to return. She never meddled in his business, never touched his files, rarely even set foot in his study. No, that wasn't right. Suddenly, Song Jin-han remembered a late night 3 months ago. He had come home to find the study light on. He walked in and saw Ran sitting at his desk, a book in her hands. He had flown into a rage then, demanding to know what she was doing there. When Ran had looked up, her eyes red, saying she was looking for a pregnancy care book and had wandered into the wrong room. He hadn't thought much of it at the time. He just found the woman's stupidity infuriating, scolded her a few times, and sent her back to the bedroom. Now, looking back, that was no accident. That was her beginning. Song Jingin's heart sank. Peace. By peace, he recalled that before he left today, when Ran had tiptoed to kiss him, smiling as she said to him, a gift. That wasn't the wife's tenderness, that was the Avenger's final farewell. He immediately dialed his assistant Lee. The call connected quickly, and Lee's respectful voice came through. President Song, have you arrived in Paris? Now, you go to the villa right now. Song Jingin's voice was hoarse and urgent. Keep an eye on Ran. Don't let her leave the house. Don't let her touch any communication devices. Also, seal up everything in my study. No one is allowed to touch anything. President Song, what happened? Lee's voice was laced with surprise. Don't ask why. Just do it. Song Jin-han was nearly shouting. I'm flying back immediately. Until I return, you keep her under lock and key. He hung up and turned to the head of the reception team. Cancel all itineraries. Arrange a plane immediately. I need to go back to the country right now. The Frenchman was stunned, but... President Song, there's the signing banquet tonight. The senior management of the other company has already... I said cancel. Song Jingin's voice was icy cold. Now, immediately, arrange the plane. He sat back down in the car, his fingers tightly gripping the phone. That text message was still on the screen, every character burning into his eyes when this woman, right under his nose, had laid a net he hadn't even noticed. And he, like the biggest fool in the world, had walked right into it. Smiling, the car turned around and headed back toward the airport. Song Jinghan closed his eyes, his chest heaving violently. He was not a man easily rattled. In the business world, he had seen countless battles, survived death's door many times, but this time, he was afraid, because the one delivering the fatal blow was not a competitor, not a business rival, but the woman he thought he had firmly in his grasp. The woman he couldn't even be bothered to give a second glance, the woman carrying his child. Through the car window, Paris faded into the distance. Song Jingin's heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, tightening bit by bit. He had no idea that, at this very moment, back in the villa in the country, when Ran was sitting in the study, the surveillance footage on the screen clearly showed Liu leading a group of people storming into the villa. She picked up the glass of warm water on the table and took a gentle sip. The curve of her lips was ice cold. Song Jinghan, this is just the beginning. Chapter 3, The True Face of the White Moonlight. 3 months ago, it was a Saturday. Song Jinghan was home, a rare occurrence. After lunch, he said he had company matters to attend to, grabbed his car keys, and left. I hadn't thought much of it at first. That was how he always was, spending all day and night at the company. Home was just a place to sleep for him, but that day, he left his phone on the couch. The phone screen lit up, and a WeChat message popped up. I wasn't trying to peek, but the name in the contact was so glaringly obvious that it was impossible to ignore. Wanqing, followed by a cherry blossom emoji. Su Wanqing, that name, in the first year of our marriage, had lodged itself like a thorn deep in my heart. Song Jinghan never shied away from mentioning her in front of me. He said Wanqing was his confidant, one of the few people in this world he truly trusted. He praised her like a celestial fairy, gentle, kind, intelligent, tactful, and me, in his words, I was always just 2 words, virtuous and compliant. Virtuous and compliant. Translated, that meant, a convenient tool. I picked up his phone, my finger hovering over that message. I knew the password. It was his birthday. I unlocked it and saw the message Su Wanqing had sent. Jinghan, next Wednesday night, the usual place. Don't forget to bring that bottle of 1982 Lafite. I scrolled up through their chat history. The more I read, the steadier my hand became. My hands were trembling, but that was when I became eerily calm. Su Wanqing called him Jinghan, and he called her Wanqing. When Su Wanqing fell ill, he drove through the night to deliver her medicine, adding a note, "Don't mess around so late next time, just stay at my place." On Su Wanqing's birthday, he transferred 200,000 yuan with the memo, "Buy what you like." On my birthday, he only gave me a card, without even telling me the pin. One day, Lu Ma let it slip. "Madam, the master is so good." To Miss Su, that day, Miss Su said she wanted osmanthus cakes from the south of the city, and the master drove 2 hours to buy them. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw my expression, quickly shutting her mouth. I smiled and said nothing, but those words were like a dull blade, slowly beginning to saw across my heart. What truly woke me up came a week later. Late one night, Song Jinghan said he had to go on a 3-day business trip. I saw him off, packing his luggage as usual. After he left, I sat in the empty living room and suddenly felt something was off. He left in a hurry. Forgetting to turn off the study light, I walked in to switch it off. On the desk lay a document, Song Group's next quarter investment plan. I wasn't a finance major, but after 3 years of marriage, I picked up enough to understand some of it. On that plan, there was a name crossed out, Gu Group. Gu Group was my father's company. 5 years ago, the Gu family went bankrupt. My father fell from the clouds overnight, eventually choosing to end his life on the company rooftop. That year, I was 22, newly engaged to Song Jinghan. I thought the Song family honored the marriage contract out of loyalty, until that night, in Song Jinghan's study, I found a hidden old document. It was a share acquisition agreement, signed 5 years ago. The agreement clearly stated that Song Group had bought a large number of shares from Gu Group's second largest shareholder at an extremely low price. And that second largest shareholder was my father's former partner. Song Jinghan had been the Mastermind from the start. My father's death wasn't an accident, he was driven to it, and Song Jing-han married me, not because of his grandfather's dying wish, but because this share acquisition needed a legitimate heir. I was that fool. I stood in the study, feeling my blood freeze solid, but in that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't cry, wouldn't make a scene, wouldn't confront him. I had given him 3 years of my youth and love, only to receive a carefully crafted deception. He not only destroyed my family but kept me around like a joke, and on top of that, there was always another woman more important than me. Song Jing-han, you owe me, and I'll make you pay back every single penny. From that day on, I became a different person. By day, I was still the gentle Mrs. Song. I ironed his shirts, made soup, and smiled as I saw him off. At night, once he was asleep, I quietly got up, rifled through every document he brought home, and noted every detail: his computer password, the numbers he casually mentioned during business dinners, the receipts he left on the desk. I recorded everything. I wasn't in a hurry. I had all the time in the world. Song Jing-han, his moonlight, his Su Wanqing, every dirty secret they had would become a blade in my hand. I would wait for the perfect moment, and then, one cut at a time, I would stab him in his most vulnerable spot. 3 months later, the moment came. He handed me a 6-month business trip itinerary, saying he had to go to Paris for a cross-border merger. I looked at his handsome, cold face and thought, you've finally given me the perfect opportunity. 6 months, enough time to organize all the evidence, set up all the timed messages, and sharpen the blade to its finest edge. Then, at the height of your triumph, I'd strike deep. As I saw him off, I kissed him. That was the last time I kissed him, and the last goodbye I ever said to him. Chapter 4. The Hunter's Gambit. From discovering the truth to sending Song Jing-han off on that plane, it took me 3 full months. No one knew how I got through those 3 months. By day, I was still the gentle, virtuous Mrs. Song, with my growing belly, staying home to nurture the pregnancy, arranging flowers, and making soup. Sometimes Lu Ma would feel sorry for me, saying how the master was never home. I just smiled and said he was busy. But every deep night, once everyone was asleep, I would open the old computer in the study, the one Song Jing-han rarely used, and piece together his business empire bit by bit. Those secrets he thought were hidden flawlessly were, in my eyes, like a dam eaten away by ants, looking solid, but ready to collapse with a single push. I got my first piece of key evidence purely by chance. That day, Su Wanqing came to visit. She wore a white silk dress, her hair loosely tied back, and a jade bracelet on her wrist, emerald green with excellent water quality. She sat on the living room sofa, took a sip of the tea Lu Ma had brewed, and then looked at me with a perfectly timed smile. Sister-in-law, your belly's getting bigger. Isn't it hard to move around? Why doesn't Jing-han hire a nanny for you? Su Wanqing's tone was caring, but there was a faint, barely noticeable glint of smugness in her eyes. I smiled back. No need, I can manage. Besides, Jing-han doesn't like too many outsiders in the house. That's true. Su Wanqing set down her teacup and said casually, Jing-han has never liked outsiders since he was a child, but you're different. Sister-in-law, you're his lawfully wedded wife, he wouldn't dare despise you. When she said that, she deliberately emphasized the words lawfully wedded, as if she was emphasizing something or mocking something. I didn't respond, I just refilled her tea. After she left that day, I found a crumpled note in the crevice of the sofa where she had been sitting. On it was a string of numbers and a name, President Jiang, Tuesday, West City Club. I didn't know if Su Wanqing left that note on purpose, or if she really dropped it by accident, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that, following this lead, I found the first account Song Jing-han used for money laundering. President Jiang, full name Jiang Dihai, was the head of a private bank on the west side of the city. Through him, Song Jing-han had funneled company funds overseas to shell companies under the guise of consulting fees and service fees, and the legal representatives of those shell companies, all distant relatives of Su Wanqing. Su Wanqing wasn't just his first love, she was his partner in crime. The second breakthrough came from Song Jing'an's private email. His password was absurdly complex, but he had a habit. He liked to write his passwords on sticky notes and paste them on the back of his computer screen. That habit had never changed since the day we got married. He probably thought that I, a housewife with only 2 years of junior college education, wouldn't understand the dense English contracts in his inbox even if I saw the password. But he forgot one thing. I majored in English. Every single email, every contract, every transaction record, I could read them all. those secrets he thought were safe, I typed out word by word in the dead of night, saving them into an encrypted folder. The hardest evidence to obtain was the paper documents locked in his office safe. Inside that safe were the real financial statements of the song group for the past 3 years, along with a complete record of his overseas asset transfers. I didn't have the password, I didn't have the key. But I had patience. I waited over a month, and finally, an opportunity came. That day, Song Jing-han came home drunk, dropped off by his driver. He collapsed onto the bed, completely unconscious, ink still staining his fingers. I noticed a small flesh-colored bandage on his thumb. He never did any manual labor. How could he have hurt himself? I gently peeled off the bandage. Beneath it was a tiny wound, as if cut by something sharp. My heart stirred. I walked to his dressing room and searched through the suit jacket he had worn that day. In the pocket, I found a utility knife stained with blood. The fingerprint lock on his safe had malfunctioned. He must have tried to pry something open and accidentally cut himself. Then I found something even more important, a bank safe deposit box access receipt. The next morning, when Song Jing-han sobered up, he had no memory of the night before. I brought him hangover soup, gently reminding him he had a meeting today and that his shirt was already ironed. He grunted, drank the soup, put on his clothes, and left. The moment he was gone, I grabbed the receipt and went to the bank. Inside the safe deposit box lay everything I needed, every page, every number. I photographed them all with my phone. Then I put everything back exactly as it was, locked the box, and slipped the receipt back into his jacket pocket. From start to finish, no one noticed a thing. That was my 3 months, like a leopard lurking in the shadows, holding my breath, making not a single misstep. I watched myself piece together all the evidence, bit by bit, then packed it all into an email. The send time of that email, I set it to the moment Song Jinghan's plane landed in Paris. I knew he would break. I knew he would search for me like a madman. I knew he would fly back from Paris, fall to his knees, and beg for my forgiveness, but I would never forgive him, never. Chapter 5. The fatal timed message. Song Jing-han sat on his private jet heading back to China, his soul seemingly ripped from his body. 4 hours had passed since he received that text message. In those 4 hours, he had made no fewer than 50 calls, but when Ran's phone remained off, he called Assistant Lee, who said that by the time he reached the villa, when Ran was already gone, Aunt Lu said she had gone out for a prenatal checkup in the afternoon and never returned. Find her, turn the entire city upside down if you have to. Song Jing-han roared into the phone, his voice hoarse-like sandpaper scraping against iron. Assistant Lee stammered on the other end, President Song, should we call the police? Call the police for what? Song Jing-han shouted back, do you want the whole world to know my wife ran away? He hung up, his fingers gripping the armrests so tightly they turned white. The plane soared through the sky at 10,000 meters, the night outside pitch black. His reflection stared back at him from the window, face ashen, forehead drenched in cold sweat. That damn text message. He opened his phone again and read the message from beginning to end once more. With every word he read, his heart sank deeper. The data was precise to 2 decimal places, the account names matched perfectly, the transaction dates aligned flawlessly with every operation he remembered signing off on. This wasn't speculation, this wasn't fabrication, these were the documents he had personally signed, the money he had personally transferred, and when Ran's hands lay all the evidence of his crimes. But what did she want? Song Jinghan's mind raced. If she wanted to destroy him, why not just hand the evidence directly to the police? If she wanted to threaten him, why not state her terms? Instead, she had sent a timed message, arriving exactly as his plane touched down in Paris. She knew he had just arrived in Paris. She knew he couldn't fly back immediately. She did it on purpose. She wanted him to be 10,000 miles away, powerless, forced to watch everything spiral out of control. Song Jing-han closed his eyes. For the first time, he realized that when Ran was 100 times more terrifying than he had ever imagined. The plane landed the next morning. Song Jing-han hadn't slept a wink all night. His eyes were bloodshot, a stubble of dark beard covering his jaw. He had never looked so disheveled, like he had aged 10 years overnight. At the airport, there was no sign of Ran. The villa was empty. Assistant Lee was waiting for him in the study, his face a mask of anxiety and fear. When he saw Song Jing-han push the door open, he immediately stood up and handed him a file. President Song, something huge has happened. Song Jing-han snatched the file and flipped it open. One look was enough to drain every trace of color from his face. It was a copy of an anonymous tip-off letter. The content was identical to the text message on his phone. The letter had been sent to the Securities Regulatory Commission and the Economic Crime Investigation Division. When did this Arrive, Song Jingin's voice trembled. This morning, they arrived together. Lee Teza swallowed hard. President Song, it gets worse. Someone in the company's executive group chat is spreading rumors that our next quarter's financial report fraud has been leaked by an insider. This morning, all 7 board members called to ask about the situation. The whole company is in turmoil now. And the stock price dropped 5 points right at the opening bell. Song Jingin's body swayed. He gripped the corner of his desk to keep from collapsing. His eyes locked onto that letter of accusation, the shock in them slowly hardening into a bone-deep hatred. When Ran, he ground out the name through clenched teeth, each syllable dripping with venom. What the hell do you think you're doing? He dialed Ran's phone again. This time, it actually connected. On the other end of the line, Ran's voice came through, gentle and calm. Hello, Jinghan. Song Jinghan felt as if he'd been electrocuted. He jerked upright. Ran, where are you? What do you think you're doing? There was a 2-second silence on the line, followed by a soft laugh. That laugh was as light as a feather, yet it sent chills crawling down Song Jingin's spine. Where I am doesn't matter, and what I'm doing doesn't matter either. Ran's voice was unhurried, as if she were discussing something trivial. What matters, Jinghan, is what you're going to do. The letter of accusation is just the beginning. 3 days from now, all the evidence will automatically upload to the servers of every major platform on the internet. By then, not just the Securities Regulatory Commission and the police, every media outlet in the world will see what the Song Group has been up to all these years. Song Jingin's breathing grew ragged. He roared, "You're insane. You're destroying me, and yourself. You're destroying our family. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crept into Ran's voice, but it wasn't anger. And it wasn't sorrow. It was a coldness that cut to the bone, a sneer. Song Jinghan, tell me, when did we ever have a family? 3 years ago, when you married me, wasn't it just to get your hands on the Gu family's 20% equity? You thought I didn't know? Song Jinghan froze. She was right. He had never once treated her as a wife. She was just a tool, a means for him to control the remnants of the Gu family's assets. But he thought she didn't know. He thought she was naive, stupid. That she would live forever in the lies he had woven for her. On the other end of the line, Ran's voice continued, Song Jinghan, do you remember my father? 5 years ago, after you signed the equity transfer agreement with him, he stood on the rooftop of the Gu Group building and looked down. In that moment, what was he thinking? Did he ever regret trusting your family so much? Song Jinghan couldn't speak. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down, his lips dry as sand. I'm guessing he didn't regret it, because he died without ever knowing that his most trusted future son-in-law personally pushed him off that roof. Ran's voice suddenly became very soft as a passing breeze. But I know, I've known for 3 months now. Song Jinghan tried to say something, but his throat felt blocked, as if a stone had lodged there. Don't call me that. Ran's voice returned to its calm steadiness. 3 days from now, it goes public. If you want to stop it, do as I say. Tonight at 8. Come find me at the warehouse in the old factory district on the east side of the city, alone. What do you want? Song Jinghan asked warily. You'll know when you get here. Ran let out a soft laugh. Oh, and Jinghan, don't even think about calling the police. Every time you report it, the countdown for my automatic upload shortens by a day. If you don't mind the entire Song Group going down with you, go ahead and try. The call ended, leaving only the dial tone. Song Jinghan clutched the phone. His hands were trembling, his lips were trembling, his entire body was trembling. He remembered this morning, before he left the house, how Ran had stood on her tiptoes to kiss him, smiling as she said she had a gift for him. That kiss, it was the final verdict. He collapsed into the sofa, powerless, staring at the ceiling. His eyes were a dead gray. Chapter 6, Public Execution. That night at 8 o'clock. Song Jinghan drove alone to the old factory district on the east side of the city. The place had been abandoned for years. Everywhere, rusted iron frames and shattered glass littered the ground. The cold wind howled through the broken holes in the walls, a mournful sound like someone crying. I stood at the far end of the warehouse, with a wall covered in dust behind me. My belly was already very large. Standing for too long made my back ache, my legs swell, but I didn't sit down. I wanted to stand. I wanted to see every single expression of his pathetic face clearly. Song Jinghan pushed open the door and walked in. Under the dim light, he caught sight of me and paused mid-step. He was wearing a dark gray coat, his hair tousled by the wind, his eyes red and swollen, his chin covered in stubble. 3 days ago, that Proud President song, now he looked like a beaten dog. When ran, he called my name, his voice hoarse. I'm here. Tell me what you want. I looked into his eyes and slowly began to speak. I want you to listen to a story. He frowned. What story? 5 years ago, there was a girl. Her father was an honest, straightforward businessman. One day, her father called her into his study and told her that the Gu family was going to form a marriage alliance with the Song family. She would soon marry the Song family's older brother, whom she had grown up with. My voice was very calm, as if I were telling someone else's story. The girl was overjoyed. She had wanted to marry that Song family brother since she was little. She thought he was the gentlest, most reliable man in the world, so she obediently waiting to become his bride, but she didn't know that her Song family brother was conspiring with her father's business partner, step by step, to swallow her father's entire enterprise into his own belly. Song Jingin's face turned pale. Inch by inch, I continued. The girl's father couldn't bear the blow. He jumped from the company's rooftop. The next day, the Song family brother called her and said the wedding would go ahead as planned. He said, Ran, from now on, I'll take care of you for the rest of your life. She believed him. She walked into the Song family's gate in a white wedding dress, thinking she had found her last refuge in the world. Enough! Song Jinghan suddenly roared. I wasn't enough. I looked into his eyes, each word falling like a stone. For 3 years, she walked on eggshells in this house. Every morning at 6, she got up to brew soup for her husband, iron every single shirt. No matter how late it was, she waited for him to come home. She thought if she was good enough, she could earn a shred of genuine affection, but what did she get in return? A husband whose phone always had his first love pinned at the top, a husband hiding a murder weapon in his study. Her father's ashes had long since turned cold, and she was still sleeping beside her enemy, carrying his child. I paused, letting the silence stretch, and looked at Song Jinghan. His face had lost all color. His lips trembled, unable to form a single word. Song Jinghan. Is this story any good? I asked with a smile, a glint of tears at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. The heroine of this story is me. The male lead is you. He took a step back, as if he had been punched square in the chest. The warehouse fell into a long, heavy silence. Wind whistled through the broken windows, a mournful sound that seemed to echo his despair. Finally, Song Jingin's voice came out hoarse. The evidence you have, can you give it back to me? Give it back. I laughed, as if I had just heard the funniest joke in the world. Song Jinghan, do you think I spent 3 months gathering this evidence just to hand it back to you? I can give you money. He took a step forward, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. Name your price. 10% of the group's shares, 15 million in cash, plus the downtown apartment, all of it, yours. Just hand over the evidence, and we can talk about anything. I looked at him, letting out a slow sigh. Song Jinghan. You still don't get it. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? His voice cracked with desperation. I want you to be ruined, disgraced. I want you to lose everything. I want you to watch, with your own eyes, as everything you hold most dear turns to ashes. I spoke slowly, each word a blade. That is what I want. Song Jinghan crumpled, as if his bones had been pulled out from under him. He slumped against the wall, staring at me with a gaze that held hatred, fear, and something I couldn't quite read. Just then, the warehouse door was pushed open from outside. A dozen men in black suits filed in, the two at the front flashing their badges, officers from the Economic Crime Investigation Division. Mr. Song Jinghan, you are suspected of financial fraud, illegal asset transfer, money laundering, and other offenses. We are now lawfully summoning you for questioning. Please come with us. Song Jinghan whipped his head toward me, disbelief flooding his face. You called the police. I shook my head. Not me. It was your precious Wanqing. His pupils shrank. What, you think the copy of that anonymous letter was only sent to the Securities Regulatory Commission? I smiled faintly. Miss Su Wanqing got wind yesterday afternoon that your business empire was about to collapse. She's sharper than anyone. She immediately dumped every dirty secret she could dig up to the police, hoping to earn some leniency. 20 minutes ago, she was arrested at the airport. Song Jingin's face drained completely. The woman he had guarded like the apple of his eye had, in the final moment, pushed him off the cliff. The suited man stepped forward, gesturing. Mr. Song, please cooperate with the investigation. As Song Jinghan was led out, he passed by me. He stopped, turned his head, and looked at me with bloodshot eyes. His lips moved, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, not a single word came out. I stood there, watching his silhouette disappear into the night. Then I slowly crouched down, covering my face with my hands. I didn't cry. I just felt so tired. Chapter 7, Alliance of Betrayers. The news of Song Jingin's arrest exploded like a bomb in the circle. The first to know was Assistant Lee. He was chairing a high-level management meeting when the call came. He answered it in front of everyone, and his face changed instantly. The meeting ended abruptly, and the entire company was thrown into chaos, no one sure if they'd still have jobs tomorrow. Then came Song Jingin's relatives. His aunt was the first to call, demanding to know what was happening, insisting that the Song family's decades-long reputation couldn't be destroyed like this, and that I should find a way to get him out. I didn't answer. His second aunt called to scold me, saying I was irresponsible, that my husband was in trouble and I was hiding outside instead of going home to manage the crisis. I didn't answer that either. Only Song Jingin's mother came to the villa in person. She sat in the living room for an entire afternoon. Aunt Lu brought her tea, but she wouldn't drink. She just stared at me, her eyes red, and asked one question. One ran, "Was it you?" I said, "Yes." She froze for a moment, then covered her face and wept, not a loud wail, but a silent, shoulder-shaking cry. She cried for a long time, and finally lifted her head, her voice hoarse beyond recognition. "His father left early. I raised him alone. I know he's not good. He was never good to you. Not to anyone, but he's still my son," I said. "He killed my father." Song's mother's crying stopped abruptly. She looked at me, her lips trembling for a long time, before she lowered her head and said nothing more. After that, she never came to see me again. Before the chaos on the Song side had even settled, Su Wanqing's side exploded with new revelations. When Su Wanqing was arrested at the airport, she was carrying a suitcase. When the officers opened it, they found it stuffed with cash, along with 2 fake passports and a one-way ticket to a small South American country. She had prepared her escape route well in advance. She just never expected the police to be faster. After her arrest, Su Wanqing did something no one anticipated. She started spilling everything during interrogation. She painted herself as a victim coerced by Song Jinghan. She cried, claiming that everything, the shell companies, the money laundering accounts, was all orchestrated by Song Jinghan. She was just a weak woman, forced into it by his power and money, with no choice. But the police weren't fools. The legal representatives of those accounts were all her relatives, and every transaction bore her personal signature. No matter how innocent she pretended to be, the evidence was there. She couldn't escape, but Su Wanqing wasn't willing to go down alone. She figured that if she was caught, Song Jinghan wouldn't get off easy either, so she began to spill the deepest, darkest secrets she had kept locked away. The news of Song Jingin's downfall came in waves, each one more damning than the last. It was Su Wanqing who told them about the bribe he paid the deputy mayor 3 years ago to secure that prime piece of land in the city center. It was Su Wanqing who revealed how he rigged an auction 2 years ago, setting up a trap that cost his competitor 200 million, and it was Su Wanqing who spilled the story of how he lost 8 million in a single night at an overseas casino last year. With every revelation, another charge was added to Song Jingin's name. The police had initially suspected him of economic crimes, but now, bribery, fraud, gambling, the list was complete. The lead investigator was stunned. He told his team that in all his years on the force, he had never seen a suspect betrayed so thoroughly by someone on his own side. When the news reached me, I was at the hospital for a prenatal checkup. My assistant Lee called, her voice heavy with a complicated tone. "Madam, Su Wanqing has provided more evidence. The CEO, it doesn't look like he'll be getting out anytime soon." I held the phone, my voice steady. "I understand." After hanging up, I placed a hand on my belly. The baby kicked inside me, a strong, deliberate movement, as if reminding me of his presence. The doctor had said it was a boy, due next month. I had once imagined what this child would look like. Would he have Song Jingin's beautiful eyes and straight nose? Would he inherit that same arrogance? The ability to have everything yet never know how to treasure it? But I didn't think about that anymore. This child was mine. He could take any surname he wanted, anything but Song. Leaving the hospital, I instructed the driver to take me to the detention center. I didn't go inside. I just sat in the car, staring at the closed iron gate. Behind that gate, Song Jinghan wore a prison uniform, his hair cropped short, his frame noticeably thinner. Su Wanqing's betrayal had hit him hard. According to Assistant Lee, he hadn't eaten or drunk anything for the first few days. moving through the motions like a walking corpse. But what did that have to do with me? When he was shielding Su Wanqing, he never imagined this day would come. That woman had shared his highs and his lows, but once the lows reached the point of imprisonment, she ran faster than anyone. The car idled outside the detention center for about 10 minutes. The driver asked cautiously, "Madam, would you like to go in?" "No," I said, "let's go back." As the car turned around, I glanced through the window. At the iron gate, a strange emotion surged in my chest, not sympathy, not pain, just a sense of absurdity. It had taken me 3 months to send this man in. It had taken him 3 months to be destroyed by another woman. The accounts among the three of us were too tangled to settle, too heavy to keep calculating. Back home, Aunt Lu brought me a bowl of silver fungus soup. I drank it slowly, one spoonful after another. Then I pulled out my phone and opened a message I had drafted long ago but never sent. The recipient was the editor-in-chief of a well-known financial media outlet. The content was the complete version of all the evidence I had gathered. My thumb hovered over the send button for 3 seconds, then I pressed it. Within 3 days, Song Jingyin's name would be on the front page of every major media outlet. Chapter 8. His humiliation and plea. Song Jinghan spent a full half-month in the detention center. During that time, the world outside turned upside down. The Song Group's stock price plummeted, its market value halved. The board of directors urgently dismissed Song Jinghan from all his positions and appointed an interim CEO to salvage the situation. Suppliers lined up to demand payment, banks froze several of the company's accounts, and the entire corporation stood like a building stripped of its foundation, on the verge of collapse. The Song family wasn't idle either. Song Jingyan's mother scrambled to find connections to get him out, begging every powerful figure who had once owed the family a favor, but no one was willing to help. No one dared touch this hot potato. The evidence was ironclad, and anyone who got involved would be burned. I went about my daily life as usual, prenatal checkups, meals, walks. Aunt Lu said I had gained some weight, that my complexion was better. I didn't notice it myself, but the string that had been pulled taut for 3 months finally loosened. The turning point came on a Tuesday. That afternoon, I received a phone call. It was the Song family's lawyer, his tone respectful but hesitant. "Madam Song, Mr. Song asked me to convey that he wishes to see you. He says there are things he must tell you in person." "No," I said. The lawyer paused, then continued, "Mr. Song said that if you don't come, he will go on a hunger strike in there." I almost laughed out loud. Song Jinghan, the once arrogant man who thought he could crush anyone beneath his heel, was now threatening me with a hunger strike. A tactic even schoolchildren would be ashamed to use. What was this? Begging? Or did he think I would feel pity? But I went anyway, not because I was soft-hearted. I wanted to see what the man who had once looked down on me, trampling me into the dirt, looked like now that he was in the dirt himself. The visitation room was small, a table, 2 chairs, separated by a thick pane of glass. The walls were a stark white, the lighting cold and harsh, the air heavy with the smell of disinfectant. When the guard brought Song Jinghan in, I almost didn't recognize him. He wore a blue prison uniform, his hair cut extremely short, his face was gaunt, cheekbones protruding sharply, dark circles ringed his eyes, and his lips were cracked and dry. When he saw me, a flicker of light passed through his eyes, but it quickly died out. He sat down on the other side of the glass, picked up the intercom phone, and stared at me. For a long moment, he couldn't say a word. I picked up my phone and waited for him to speak. When ran, his voice was hoarser than the last time we met in that warehouse, like a rusty saw cutting through wood. "You came, what do you have to say?" I asked. He lowered his head, silent for a long time, so long that I thought he wouldn't speak at all. Then he looked up, and I saw a thin sheen of moisture in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. 3 words. I had waited 3 years to hear them, but now that they had come, they stirred nothing in me. It was like throwing a stone into a bottomless well, not even an echo. "Is that all?" I asked. "No." He took a deep breath, his fingers clenching the phone so tightly that the knuckles turned white. When ran, "I know I've done a lot wrong. I ruined your father, and I ruined you. These past 3 years, I haven't been good to you. I haven't fulfilled my duties as a husband. When I say I'm sorry, I mean it." But, he paused, his eyes reddening even more. "But I beg you, for the sake of our child, help me this once." I watched him silently. "The baby is almost here." Song Jingyan's voice trembled. "He can't be born without a father. I promise you, once I get out, I'll sign the divorce papers. I'll leave with nothing, take everything I own, whatever it takes to make you feel better. I'll do it." But please, don't let me go to prison. I don't want my child to grow up knowing his father is a criminal." He spoke with such sincerity that it almost made me believe he truly cared about this child. I smiled and asked him, "Song Jinghan, do you really care about this child?" He froze. "When I was 3 months pregnant, I was vomiting nonstop. You came home, took one look, and said, 'All women go through this during pregnancy,' then left for a dinner with Su Wanqing. At 5 months, I had the Down syndrome screening. The doctor said the results were a bit abnormal and needed further testing. I cried at home for 2 whole days. Where were you?" "You were in Japan, soaking in hot springs with Su Wanqing. At 7 months, my belly was so big I couldn't bend over, but I still crouched down every day to tie your shoelaces. You never even said thank you. At 8 months, you handed me a 6-month business trip itinerary and left without a second thought." I stopped, looking into his eyes. "Song Jinghan, tell me, when did you ever care about this child?" His face flushed bright red, his lips trembled, but not a single word came out. "You're begging me for the sake of the child." I'm touched. "Really?" I set down the phone and stood up. "But begging me won't help. Song Jinghan, it's too late for everything." With that, I turned and walked toward the door. Suddenly, a loud crash came from behind me. I turned back and saw Song Jinghan sliding off his chair, collapsing to his knees. Through the thick glass partition, he knelt there, the phone dangling in midair, his body trembling uncontrollably, his mouth open and closed, as if he were saying something. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't need to hear it. What he was going to say was nothing more than, "I was wrong. Forgive me. Give me another chance." These 3 sentences, I had fantasized about them countless times. On every night he didn't come home, in every moment he smiled at Su Wanqing but gave me a cold face, in every deep night when I ate alone, slept alone, and counted the baby's kicks alone. I had imagined him saying those 3 words to me one day, but now that he was actually saying them, I only felt exhausted. I pushed open the door to the visitation room and walked away without looking back. Chapter 9, The Last. Dignity, torn to shreds, after returning from the detention center. I developed a low-grade fever. Luma was terrified. She rushed me to the hospital that very night. The doctor said it was exhaustion compounded by severe mental stress. I needed bed rest, or it would affect the baby. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days. The fever subsided, but I still had no energy. The sky outside the window was gray. The hospital room walls were white. I felt like I was trapped inside a giant box, unable to breathe. On the morning of the 4th day, my lawyer called. He said Song Jinghan's case would go to trial next month. He asked if I wanted to testify in court. I said no. The written evidence was more than enough to convict him. My presence would only turn the trial into a farce. The lawyer paused on the other end of the line, then said, "Mrs. Song, there's one more thing. Mr. Song is at the detention center, and he calls out your name every day." I didn't say anything. "He says he wants to see you, that he regrets everything, that he's sorry." The lawyer's tone was hesitant. He also said that if you're willing to forgive him, he'll give up everything. I gripped the phone, staring out the window. I suddenly felt like laughing. Regret. Sorry. If apologies worked, what would prisons be for? Tell him, I said, my voice very soft. I will never forgive him, never. After hanging up, I asked Luma to bring me my suitcase. At the very bottom, pressed under everything, was a craft paper envelope. Inside were the divorce papers and a memorandum I had written with my own hand. No, it was more accurate to call it a declaration of refusal to forgive. The divorce agreement was simple. I wanted nothing, not a single cent of the Song family's money, houses, cars, or stocks. I wanted to end this marriage cleanly, just as I had entered it cleanly. I didn't want anyone to say that when Ran married Song Jinghan for money, nor did I want anyone to say that I sent him to prison to get a share of the assets. I married him because I loved him. I sent him to prison because I hated him. Neither of these things had anything to do with money. Besides the divorce papers, there was one more thing in the envelope, a photograph of my father. The photo was taken many years ago. My father was wearing a white shirt, standing in front of the Gu Group building, his eyes crinkled with a smile. Back then, our family hadn't gone bankrupt yet. He was still that confident, ambitious President Gu. I had kept this photo pressed at the bottom of my suitcase, never daring to take it out, because every time I saw it, I remembered his last silhouette on the rooftop. But now, I could take it out, because the man who killed him had finally received the punishment he deserved. The next morning, 9 months pregnant, I went to the law firm. The Song family's lawyer was also there. When he saw the divorce papers I handed over, his face changed color several times. He probably thought I would demand a huge settlement, but he never expected that I would ask for nothing at all. Mrs. Song, are you sure? The lawyer couldn't help asking. Under marital law, you are fully entitled to half the assets, and given Mr. Song's current situation, he can't stop you. I said, I'm sure. The lawyer was silent for a few seconds, then asked, in the custody of the child? That's mine. I lifted my head and looked him straight in the eye. This child has nothing to do with the Song family. I don't want his child support, and I don't want his visitation rights, from now on. This child's surname is Gu. The lawyer opened his mouth, but in the end, he said nothing. He probably knew that no one could persuade me. After completing the formalities and stepping outside, the sunlight was brilliant. I stood on the steps of the law firm, letting out a long, deep breath, as if I were expelling all the oppression, the grievances, the rage of the past 3 years in one single exhale. The air felt different now, lighter, almost foreign against my skin. Auntie Lou was waiting for me by the door. She helped me into the car with a gentle, steadying hand. As the engine hummed to life and the vehicle began to pull away, I turned my head and glanced back at that towering building. A strange thought surged up from somewhere deep inside me. Did I really win, or did I lose? On the surface, I had won. Song Jing-han was disgraced and ruined. Su-wan-ching was locked away behind bars. My father's revenge was finally complete, and I had earned my freedom. But those 3 years, the youth I had poured out, the feelings I had given so freely, the naive girl who once believed in love with all her heart, they would never come back to me. I placed a hand on my belly. The baby stirred inside me, a soft flutter. That small movement felt like an answer. When I got home, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. I logged into a social media account I hadn't touched in ages. It only had a few dozen followers. Friends I had known before my marriage. I typed a single line and posted it. Everything is over. A new beginning starts tomorrow. After that, I opened an email. It was one I had written to myself a month ago. The content was simple, just 3 lines. When ran, if you're reading this email, it means you've already succeeded. Song Jing-han isn't worth your tears. Live well, for Dad, and for yourself. I stared at the screen, my eyes burned with the sting of unshed tears, but I didn't cry. From the moment I had decided to take my revenge 3 months ago, I had made myself a promise. I would never shed another tear for that man. He didn't deserve it. Later that day, I gathered everything Song Jing-han had left behind in our home, suits, watches, shoes, even that bottle of 1982 Lafite he had treasured for half his life. I packed it all up and had Auntie Lou deliver it to the Song family's old mansion. Not a single item remained. Everything was returned to its rightful owner. When the maid came back, she brought a message with her. Song Jing-in's mother had stood at the doorstep of the old mansion, clutching that pile of belongings, her eyes red-rimmed. She said, when ran, the Song family has wronged you. I was sitting on the balcony when I heard those words, soaking in the November sunlight. It was warm, just right, spreading over me like a thin, soft blanket. I closed my eyes. I didn't answer. The Song family had wronged me. I knew that, but saying it now meant nothing anymore. Chapter 10. New life in ruins. On the day of the trial, I didn't go. According to the lawyer, Song Jing-han kept his head down throughout the entire hearing. He didn't utter a single word in his own defense. When the judge asked if he pleaded guilty, he was silent for nearly a full minute. Then, in a hoarse, broken voice, he said, guilty. In the gallery, Song Jing-in's mother fainted from weeping. Su-wan-ching stood beside him as a co-defendant, but she couldn't bring herself to look at him. The two people who had once been close enough to share every secret now couldn't even meet each other's eyes. Su-wan-ching's lawyer tried to argue for her innocence, but as the judge read out each piece of evidence one by one, the lawyer's voice grew weaker and weaker until it finally fell silent. In the end, Song Jing-han was sentenced to 12 years in prison for economic crimes. Su-wan-ching received 8 years. At the moment the verdict was announced, Song Jing-han lifted his head and scanned the gallery, as if searching for someone. But that person wasn't there. The one he was looking for would never appear before him again. Assistantly called me with the verdict while I was at the hospital for my final prenatal checkup. The doctor told me the baby was developing well, in the right position, and could come at any time. I hung up the phone and sat on a chair in the hospital corridor, staring into space for a long while. The hallway was bustling with people, pregnant women with big bellies, fathers holding newborn babies, elderly folks hurrying past with children in tow. The world kept turning. The sun kept rising. 12 years and 8 years. That golden couple would have plenty of time to reminisce about the old days in the same prison. I wondered if Su Wanqing would still be gentle and tender towards Song Jinghan. I wondered if Song Jinghan would still see her as the moonlight of his heart. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was that they had finally paid the price. 3 days later, my contractions began. It was 10 days before my due date. I was at home that afternoon, drinking a bowl of snow fungus soup, when I suddenly felt a tightness in my abdomen. Then a warm trickle of fluid ran down my thigh. Auntie Lu saw it and her face went pale. She quickly called the driver, and we rushed to the hospital. Traffic was terrible on the way. Auntie Lu was sweating with anxiety, urging the driver to go faster while holding my hand and trying to comfort me. I leaned back in my seat, trembling from the pain. But my mind was eerily clear. I told myself, when Ran, you have to be strong. You have to bring this child into the world safely, not for Song Jinghan, not for anyone else, just for yourself. When we reached the hospital, I was wheeled straight into the delivery room. The labor was longer and more agonizing than I had imagined. Each contraction felt like a hammer slamming into my spine, making it impossible to breathe. The nurse kept shouting, "Push!" I clenched my teeth, drenched in sweat, feeling as though my body were being torn in two. Then, a sharp, piercing cry shattered all the pain. "It's a boy, 7 pounds 2 ounces. Mother and baby are both healthy," the nurse said with a smile. I lay on the delivery bed, turned my head, and saw a tiny, wrinkled, red-faced creature being brought close to me. His eyes were squeezed shut, his little fists clenched tight, and he was wailing at the top of his lungs. In that moment, my tears finally fell. It was the first time I had cried in 3 months. Not from sadness, not from pain, but from a love so immense, so overwhelming, it swallowed everything inside me. From now on, there was someone in this world who shared my blood. He was my son, the treasure I had fought so hard to protect, the sole reason for the rest of my life. I named him Gunyenin, Nyen for remembrance, and for peace, to remember my father, to wish you a lifetime of safety. On the day I was discharged, Auntie Lu came to pick me up with bags and bags of things. Nyenin was cradled in her arms, a tiny bundle fast asleep. I wrapped myself in a thick down jacket and slowly walked out of the hospital. At the entrance, a few ginkgo trees stood tall, their golden leaves scattered across the ground. They looked beautiful. I stood there for a while, taking in the quiet. The city was still the same, towering buildings, endless streams of cars and people, but in my world, everything had changed. I pressed a hand to my chest. It felt light, as if a stone that had weighed me down for 3 years had finally been lifted away. A month later, I left the city with Nyenin. Before I left, I didn't notify anyone. I just packed a few clothes, brought my father's photograph and Nyenin's birth certificate. The house was returned with Lu Ma's help. The rent had been paid through the end of the year. The Song family had no idea I was leaving. They probably thought I would continue living in that villa, quietly playing the role of the former Mrs. Song. But why would I stay there? Every single brick in that house pressed down on my memories. Every night, I waited there for someone who would never come home. Every morning, I smiled at a cold face across the breakfast table. The air there was bitter, the water there was harsh. I didn't want Nyenin to grow up in a place like that. Assistantly called me once. He asked if I could visit Song Jinghan in prison. He said the CEO really wanted to see me, really wanted to see the child. I refused, not because I was heartless, but because I didn't want my son to have any connection with that man. What Song Jinghan owed me, he had paid it back, but that didn't mean I had to forgive him. It certainly didn't mean I had to let the child acknowledge him. He had missed 8 months of pregnancy, he had missed the delivery, he had missed Nyenin's first cry, first time opening his eyes. These things, once missed, they're gone forever. You can't go back. I took Nyenin to a small town in the south. It was near the sea. The air carried a salty, damp taste. The streets were lined with sycamore trees. I rented a small apartment and cleaned it until it sparkled. Lu Ma came with me. She said she would help take care of Nyenin until he turned 1 year old. After that, we'd figure things out later. I was deeply grateful to her. During my hardest times, she was the only one who stood by me from beginning to end. I opened a small flower shop in that little town. The shop's name was Nyenin. I wrote the sign myself. The characters were crooked and uneven, but I thought They looked beautiful. Every morning, I arranged fresh flowers at the entrance, red roses, white lilies, yellow sunflowers. The air was filled with a sweet floral fragrance. Sunlight streamed through the glass window, bathing the entire shop in warm, golden light. Nyenin lay in a cradle at the back of the shop. When he woke up, I picked him up and fed him. When he fell asleep, I gently laid him back down. Occasionally, customers came in to buy flowers, noticed him in the cradle, and smiled, saying he was such a beautiful child. I smiled back and said thank you. Days passed, plain yet fulfilling. No Song Jinghan, no Suwanqing, nothing that reminded me of those painful years. I no longer had to wait for anyone to come home, no longer had to iron anyone's shirts, no longer had to cry until dawn over someone's coldness. My world had become very, very small, small enough to hold only Nyenin, the flower shop, and myself. One evening, I carried Nyenin along the seawall for a walk. The setting sun hung at the edge of the sea, dyeing the entire sky orange-red. Nyenin babbled in my arms, his tiny hand gripping my finger, refusing to let go. I looked down at him. He smiled at me. That was the most beautiful smile I had ever seen in my entire life, different from his father's. In that smile, there was nothing but trust and dependence on me. I lowered my head and gently kissed his forehead. The wind blew through my hair. I closed my eyes, savoring that moment of peace. I remembered a long time ago, someone had asked me, "What is happiness?" Back then, I said happiness was marrying the person you love and living together forever. Now I understood. Happiness isn't about who you marry. Happiness is finally being able to be yourself, no longer performing for anyone else. Song Jinghan, thank you for teaching me that lesson. Side story later, 6 months passed. Lu Ma returned to her hometown. I took care of Nyenin alone. Days were so busy my feet barely touched the ground, but it was solid, steady. The flower shops business was better than I had imagined. During peak season, I could earn 200 to 300 yuan a day, enough for the two of us to get by. One day, I received a letter. It was sent from prison. The envelope bore Song Jinghan's name. I held that letter in my hands, turning it over and over for a long time. In the end, I still opened it. The letter wasn't long, just 1 page. Song Jinghan's handwriting was still as beautiful as before, but the strokes trembled slightly, as if he had used all his strength just to finish writing. Ran, I've written this letter in my heart countless times, but when it finally landed on paper, I found that every word felt weightless. If I say I'm sorry, you must be tired of hearing it. If I say I regret it, you won't believe me, so I'll only say one thing. Nyenin, is he okay? I know I have no right to ask this, but I think about it every single day. I want to know if his eyes look like yours. I want to know if his smile is as beautiful as yours. There's a small window in my cell. Every day at 3 in the afternoon, a patch of sunlight shines in. It's the only bright spot in the entire prison. I always think of you at that time. I think of the smile you gave me before you left. That smile, I'll never forget it for the rest of my life. Ran, if there were a regret medicine in this world, I would trade everything to get it, but I know there isn't. So I won't ask for your forgiveness. I only ask you to tell me, is the child okay? Song Jinghan, written from prison. I folded the letter paper neatly and placed it back into the envelope. Then I put it in the deepest drawer of my desk. After that, I picked up a pen and wrote a single line on a postcard. He's fine, none of your business. After writing it, I found a stamp in the drawer and stuck it on. The next day, I dropped the postcard into the mailbox, then turned around and walked away, holding Nyenin in my arms. That postcard was the last message Song Jinghan ever received from me in his entire life. From that day on, I never replied to any of his letters again. The letters that came later, I didn't even open them. They all piled up in that drawer, and later, I rarely opened that drawer at all. The sunlight was beautiful right now. Nyenin was asleep in his cradle. I sat in the flower shop, watching the sycamore trees outside sway gently in the wind. I felt that if I could live like this for the rest of my life, it would already be more than enough. Someone pushed open the door and picked out a bunch of white roses. I looked up and smiled. Welcome, please come again, Side story 1. 10 years in prison. During the first year of Song Jinghan's imprisonment, he thought about one thing almost every single day. When the woman's final look at him was like watching a pile of crushed out cigarette ash. No hatred, no resentment, just clean, empty, nothing at all. He would have preferred her to hate him, to rush forward and slap him across the face, to call him a beast, but she did nothing. She simply stood up, pushed open the door to the visiting room, and walked away without looking back. That door slowly closed in front of his eyes, cutting off the light from outside, and severing the last thread of connection between them. The days in prison were harder than he had imagined, not the physical pain, the psychological torment, falling from the clouds into the mud. From the all-powerful CEO's song to inmate number 0724, that kind of fall was enough to shatter a man's spine. In those first few days, he couldn't sleep through entire nights, lying on the hardboard bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind played scenes from the past 3 years like a movie on loop. The image of when Ran crouching down to tie his shoelaces, when Ran walking out of the kitchen with a bowl of soup, smiling and saying, "Drink it while it's hot." When Ran waiting for him at the entrance of the prenatal checkup clinic, waiting an entire afternoon. Finally taking a taxi home alone, when Ran, 8 months pregnant, standing on tiptoe to kiss him, saying, "I've prepared a gift for you." The warmth of that kiss, he could still feel it, soft, cool, like a snowflake landing on his lips. Back then, he had only felt annoyed. Now, he knew that was her last tenderness toward him, and he hadn't even given her a single proper glance in the spring of his 2nd year in prison. Song Jing-han flipped through an old magazine in the prison library. There was a feature interview with the prosecutor who had handled his case. The reporter asked, "What impressed you most about this case?" The prosecutor replied, "The calmness of the whistleblower. The way she presented the evidence was extremely professional. Every piece was clearly labeled and sourced. The logical chain was so complete it didn't seem like an amateur's work. We encountered almost no obstacles during the investigation because she had already organized all the key evidence for us in advance." Song Jing-han stared at that passage for a long time, then he closed the magazine and placed it back on the shelf. He walked to the window, looked out at the gray, overcast sky, and suddenly let out a laugh. That laugh was very light, carrying an indescribable bitterness. He had always thought when Ran had acted on impulse, that she had stumbled upon the evidence by luck. Now he knew she had prepared for 3 whole months. During those 3 months, she smiled at him every day, ironed his shirts every day, and every night after he fell asleep, she got up to go through his documents. And what was he doing? He was having dinner with Su Wanqing, shopping for handbags, complaining that when Ran's cooking wasn't to his taste, plotting how to transfer more assets overseas. He thought she was a fool, but she had calculated every single step he would take. This woman was more formidable than all the business rivals he had ever faced combined, and he had pushed her away with his own hands. In his 3rd year, Su Wanqing was transferred to another prison to serve her sentence. Before leaving, she asked someone to bring Song Jing-han a message. "I'm sorry." When he heard those words, he was eating in the cafeteria. His chopsticks paused for a moment, then he continued shoveling food into his mouth, his face completely expressionless. The person next to him asked, "Aren't you angry?" He said, "What's there to be angry about? She was always that kind of person. I was the one who misjudged her." He said that. But that night, he couldn't sleep again. He remembered many years ago, when Su Wanqing stood in his family's courtyard wearing a white dress, tilting her head up and saying, "Brother Jing-han, when I grow up, I'm going to marry you." They were both so young back then. He was still a spirited, ambitious youth, and Su Wanqing was still a little girl with sparkling eyes. He thought that was love. He thought Su Wanqing was the person he should cherish most in this life. Looking back now, it was nothing but a self-deceiving joke. Su Wanqing loved the air of the Song group, not the man Song Jing-han. When he was no longer CEO Song, when he put on a prison uniform, she ran faster than anyone. But when Ran, the wife he had never once looked at with proper respect, had seen through him 3 years ago, in his 5th year, Song Jing-han received a commutation for good behavior. When the prison guard told him the news, he froze for a moment, then asked, "Is she doing well outside?" The guard didn't understand and asked who he meant. He shook his head and said nothing. What he really wanted to ask was about when Ran and the child he had never even seen once. Was it a boy or a girl? Did it look like him? Had when Ran ever told the child anything about its father? When she did, what had she said? These questions had haunted him for 5 years, but he never got answers. He had written many letters to Ran, sending them one after another, like throwing stones into the sea. The first few vanished without a trace. Later, one was returned with addressee unknown written on the envelope. Where had she gone? No one knew. Assistant Lee had long since resigned. None of the Song family relatives were willing to help him find out. His mother had visited a few times, her eyes always red, hesitating to speak. When he asked about Ran, she just shook her head and said, "Don't think about it anymore, she's not coming back." In his 8th year, Song Jing-han learned how to repair watches in the prison workshop. An older inmate taught him. The old inmate said the thing he was best at in life was fixing broken things, whether it was a watch or anything else. Song Jing-han studied very seriously. His fingers were pricked by tweezers several times, but he persisted until he mastered it. He took apart a broken old watch and reassembled it, over and over, until he could complete the entire process with his eyes closed. One night, lying on his bunk, a thought suddenly struck him. Some things can't be fixed. Feelings are like that. Trust is like that too. It had taken him 8 years to understand this truth, but it was already too late. That winter, Song Jing-han received a package. There was no sender's name on it, only an address, a street name in a small town in the south. He opened the package. Inside was a gray scarf. The knitting wasn't very fine, the stitches were a bit uneven, but the material was soft, warm to the touch. Tucked at the bottom of the scarf was a small card with only 4 words written on it: "It's cold. Take care." No signature, but he recognized the handwriting. It was when Rance. Song Jing-han pressed the scarf against his face, his shoulders shaking violently for a long time. The inmates in his cell thought he was crying, but no one heard a single sound. He himself wasn't sure if it counted as crying. It had been so long since he last shed tears, so long he'd forgotten what tears tasted like. All he knew was that the scarf was warm, so warm it felt like someone had passed a faint glimmer of light from a very far away place, but that light was too weak to illuminate the darkness before his eyes. 2 more years passed. Song Jing-han was released upon completing his sentence. The day he walked out of prison was overcast. Gray clouds pressed low, as if it might rain at any moment. He wore the same dark gray coat he'd entered with 10 years ago, the clothes long out of style, the cuffs frayed and worn. Standing outside the prison gate beyond the barbed wire, staring blankly at a world that had become alien. The streets weren't like this 10 years ago. There were no shared bikes back then, no QR code payment billboards. The plane trees along the road had grown much taller. The small shop across the street had been replaced by a milk tea parlor. The Song Group's building still stood, but it no longer bore the Song name. His mother had passed away from illness 3 years prior. The old family mansion had been auctioned off by the court to settle debts. Everything that belonged to Song Jing-han had been wiped clean by time before he even stepped out of prison. He stood at the prison gate for about half an hour, not knowing where to go. Then he remembered the address on that card, a small southern town, by the sea, with a street lined with plane trees. With the few hundred yuan left in his pocket, he bought a train ticket. After more than 10 hours of travel, he finally found the place. The street wasn't big. Small shops lined both sides, a barber shop, a fruit stand, and a tiny flower shop. The shop sign was handwritten, the characters neon and crooked and uneven, yet radiating an indescribable warmth. Song Jing-han stood across the street, looking through the glass window at a woman. She was crouched in front of a flower rack, arranging a new batch of sunflowers. Her hair was shorter than before, casually tied back. She wore a beige linen shirt and a dark blue apron, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, revealing slender, fair wrists. The silhouette of her profile was still the same, soft yet resolute. 10 years had passed. She had changed so much, yet seemed to have remained exactly the same. Song Jing'an's breath hitched. He instinctively took a step forward, then retreated, hiding behind a plane tree, afraid to come out. It wasn't that he feared being seen by her. He feared seeing the expression that would appear on her face when she saw him: disgust, indifference, or something even more terrifying. No reaction at all. Just then, the flower shop door swung open. A boy ran out. He looked about 9 years old, wearing a white t-shirt, with thick, dark hair and bright, round eyes. In his hand, he held a popsicle, grinning as he called back, "Mom, Auntie Lou said we're having dumplings for dinner tonight. Come home early." The woman looked up and smiled. "Got it. You go ahead. Mom will finish arranging these flowers and be right back." The boy said okay, lit his popsicle, and skipped off toward the end of the street. As he ran past Song Jing-han saw his face clearly. Those eyes were like Rance, but the curve of his brow, the height of his nose bridge, they were like his own. Song Jing-han shuddered. His palms slick with sweat. That was his son, the child he had thought about for 10 years, yet never even knew the name of. He was already this big. He could run, jump, laugh, and shout Mom. His childhood had no father in it. Song Jing-han wanted to rush forward, to hold him, to tell him he was his father. But his feet felt nailed to the ground, unable to take A single step. What identity could he use to acknowledge him? A freshly released convict, a father absent for 10 years, a failure forgotten by everyone. He stood there behind the plane tree, watching the boy disappear around the street corner, watching when Rand tidy up the flower shop, lock the door, and walk in the opposite direction. Her back was still straight, her steps unhurried. She walked past a row of plane trees, sunlight filtering through the gaps in the leaves, falling on her shoulders. She didn't look back, not once. From beginning to end, Song Jing-han leaned against the tree trunk, slowly crouching down, burying his face in his palms. He remembered the navy blue tie Rand had tied for him 10 years ago, the kiss she had stood on tiptoe to give, and her smiling words, "I have a gift for you." He hadn't taken it seriously back then, now he understood. When Rand's gift to him had never been that timed text message that shattered him, the gift she gave him was a future he could never reach. That night, Song Jing-han sat in the milk tea parlor at the end of the street the whole night. He ordered the cheapest plain milk tea and sat by the window, staring at the closed flower shop across the street. When the shop owner came to clear the table, she glanced at him and asked, "Are you from out of town?" He nodded. She asked again, "Looking for someone?" He nodded, then shook his head. The owner didn't press further, refilled his cup with hot water, and left. When dawn broke, Song Jing-han stood up, finished the now cold water, and walked out of the milk tea parlor. He didn't head toward the flower shop. He walked toward the train station. Along the way, he asked himself countless questions. Would Rand be willing to see him? Would his son acknowledge him? Did he still have the right to stand before them and say, "I'm back"? He couldn't find answers to these questions, or rather, he knew the answers but refused to admit them. Never in his life had he hated himself as much as he did in this moment. He hated the cold, arrogant, self-righteous Song Jing-han from 10 years ago. That Song Jing-han had everything but cherished nothing. Now that he had nothing, he finally understood what he had lost. But in this world, there is no medicine for regret. Song Jing-han's silhouette disappeared into the morning mist, retracing the path he had come, step by step, leaving that street lined with plane trees. He didn't look back. What he didn't know was that, at the very moment he turned, the flower shop's curtain was gently pulled aside from within. When Rand stood by the window, holding a bouquet of freshly wrapped white roses in her arms, she watched the fading figure through the glass, her gaze calm as still water. She had recognized him. She recognized him the moment he stood behind that plane tree. He had aged so much, grown so thin, his back was slightly hunched. His hair had turned significantly grayer. The handsome, cold man from 10 years ago was now nothing more than a ragged, weathered shadow of his former self. But she did nothing. She didn't walk out, didn't call out to him, and didn't let her son see him. It wasn't because of hatred. That trace of resentment had already dissipated like smoke the first time Yenin smiled at her. She simply felt there was no need. Some wounds, even if they've scabbed over, should never be torn open again. Some stories, even without an ending, are more dignified than a pathetic sequel. Her life was good, peaceful, stable, with flowers. With Yenin, she didn't need someone who had once trampled her into the mud to come back and disrupt all of this. What he owed her had already been repaid with 10 years in prison. She owed him nothing, absolutely nothing. When Rand inserted the white roses into the vase, then turned and walked toward the back room, Yenin was hunched over the desk doing homework, biting the tip of his pen, his brows furrowed in concentration. She ruffled his hair and said with a smile, "Don't bite the pen. Go wash your hands quickly. Auntie Lou's dumplings are almost ready." Yenin let out an "oh," dropped the pen, and ran out. The room fell silent. Outside the window, the sunlight was just right. Extra Chapter 2, His Moonlight. In the third year of Su Wancheng's imprisonment, her mental state began to deteriorate. At first, it was just insomnia, whole nights without sleep, staring at the ceiling with her eyes wide open, muttering incessantly to herself. Later, it escalated to auditory hallucinations. She kept saying she heard someone crying in the neighboring cell. Her cellmates said she was overreacting, so she started throwing things, breaking her toothbrush and stabbing it against the wall. The prison doctor came several times and diagnosed her with severe anxiety disorder with depressive tendencies, recommending a transfer to a specialized medical prison. Before the transfer, Su Wancheng wrote a letter to Song Jing-han. The content was chaotic and disjointed, sentences jumping from one topic to another, as if written in a state of delirium. One passage appeared repeatedly. Jinghan, how did we end up like this? I could have lived such a good life. I'm so beautiful. My family background is excellent. Men lined up for me all the way to France. Why didn't I choose someone else? Why did I choose you? Tell me, why? When Song Jinghan saw this letter, he was silent for a long time. He didn't reply. He simply folded the letter neatly and pressed it under his pillow. He had no answer, and he no longer wanted to search for one. Whether Su Wanqing had truly loved him or had only loved the power and status behind him, that was a question he no longer wished to pursue. Some truths were better left unknown. After Su Wanqing was transferred, Song Jingnan's life became even quieter than before. No one brought him those messy bits of news anymore, and no one whispered "I'm sorry" in his ear endlessly. He worked, ate, and slept as usual, running like a machine. Occasionally, he would think of Su Wanqing, but those memories had become very blurry, like shadows seen through a frosted glass window. He remembered that when Su Wanqing smiled, her eyes curved beautifully. He remembered that when she played the piano, her fingers were slender and agile, the sound of the music as clear as a spring. But he also remembered her in the interrogation room, crying as she pinned all the blame on him, remembered how she didn't even glance at him when she signed the verdict. That woman, he had loved her, hated her, and now felt nothing at all. Once, when he was called to the infirmary to pick up medication, he passed through a corridor and thought he heard Su Wanqing's laughter in a daze. He stopped, listened intently for a long time, but the laughter never came again. In the corridor, there was only the sound of wind whistling through the iron window bars, like an unending sight. Later, he heard that Su Wanqing had improved somewhat in the medical prison. She could take her medication on time, and her emotions had stabilized. Someone asked her if she regretted anything. She said, "What's the use of regret? The biggest regret of my life is having followed Song Jinghan." When this remark reached his ears, he simply smiled and didn't refute it. If she wanted to blame him, let her. They would never see each other again in this lifetime. Extra Chapter 3, Nyenan turns 10. On Nyenan's 10th birthday, when Ran bought him a small cake, it wasn't that she couldn't afford a bigger one, it was that only 2 people lived in the house, and a large cake would go to waste. Auntie Lu had returned to her hometown 2 years ago, occasionally calling during holidays, her voice still as vigorous as ever. When Ran placed the cake on the table, inserted 10 candles, and lit them one by one, Nyenan leaned over the table, his eyes sparkling in the candlelight, and asked, "Mom, can I make a wish?" When Ran said, "Go ahead," Nyenan clasped his hands together, closed his eyes, and thought very seriously for a long time. Then he opened his eyes and blew out all the candles in one breath. When Ran asked him what he had wished for, he shook his head and said, "I can't tell you. If I do, it won't come true." When Ran smiled and gently tapped his nose, not pressing further as they were cutting the cake, Nyenan suddenly blurted out, "Mom, what does my dad really look like?" When Ran's hand, holding the knife, paused. Nyenan had asked this question when he was younger, and each time she had said that Dad had gone to a very faraway place and wouldn't be back for a while. Later, when Nyenan grew a bit older and probably picked up bits and pieces from the neighbors' gossip, he stopped asking. When Ran had thought he no longer cared, but here he was, asking again today. When Ran put down the knife and looked into Nyenan's eyes, those eyes were clear and bright, holding no resentment, only pure curiosity. She thought for a moment and decided not to make up another story. She said, "Nyenan, what your dad looks like, you'll know someday, but not now." Nyenan tilted his head, thought for a moment, and then asked, "Then is he a bad person?" When Ran was silent for a while, she remembered the image of Song Jinghan kneeling behind the glass in the visitation room, remembered the words in his letters asking how the child was, remembered the figure of him standing behind the plane tree after his release. Too afraid to come out, she took a deep breath and said, "He's not a bad person, he just made a lot of mistakes." Nyenan let out an "oh," lowered his head, and ate his cake, with a ring of cream around his mouth. When Ran picked up a napkin to wipe his mouth, and he obediently tilted his head up to let her clean it, after she finished, he buried his head and continued eating. That night, after when Ran was certain Nyenan had fallen asleep, she sat alone in the living room for a very long time. Lost in a daze, she remembered that morning 10 years ago when she had seen Song Jinghan off at the door, remembered that kiss she had given him while standing on tiptoe, remembered that navy blue tie. Those images had not surfaced in her mind for a long time. She had thought she had long forgotten them, but in truth, they had only been buried very deep. so deep that it took 10 years to dig them out. She owed Nyenin an answer, but she was not going to give it now. Some truths can only be understood when he is old enough. Some pains can only be spoken of lightly. When enough time has passed. Extra Chapter 4. Another year of golden phoenix trees. It was another autumn, and the leaves of the phoenix trees had turned the entire street golden. When Ran was sweeping the ground in front of the flower shop, gathering piles of fallen leaves one by one, preparing to stuff them into garbage bags, Nyenin was helping beside her, wielding a small broom with an exaggerated seriousness, sending dust flying everywhere, more of a hindrance than a help. When Ran smiled and said, "Stop sweeping, go do your homework," Nyenin made a funny face, tossed down the broom, and ran inside. The wind chime on the flower shop door jingled for a while, then fell back into silence. Across the street, beneath that same phoenix tree, that figure appeared again. Over the past few years, every autumn when the phoenix leaves turned yellow, he would come, standing beneath the same tree, maintaining the same distance, watching from afar. For a little while, he looked older than the last time, his hair mostly white now, his frame noticeably stooped. He stood in the shadow of the tree, his gaze piercing through the golden fallen leaves, landing on the open door of the flower shop. That look was neither sorrowful nor calm, it was more like completing some kind of ritual. When Ran straightened her back and wiped the sweat from her forehead, her peripheral vision swept across the street. He was still there. She did not pause in her work, continuing to load the leaves into the bag, tying it shut, and placing it by the wall. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the phoenix leaves, scattering like fragments of gold on the ground. Later, when Ran carried the tied garbage bag back into the shop, never glancing across the street again, a newly changed business hours sign was pasted on the glass door of the flower shop. Printed on the paper were a few hand-drawn little daisies, and beside them, a line was scrawled in crooked colored markers, "Fresh sunflowers. Available today. Welcome." Nyenin had drawn it just yesterday. In the distance, across the sea, the whistle of a ferry pierced through the golden phoenix trees, drifting leisurely into every alley and street of the small town. Everything continued. The flowers bloomed, the child grew, the sea breeze blew through the golden phoenix leaves, and the days passed by, calmly, steadily, one after another. The end.